So first beer is called Wash. I've done this one a few times. It's probably our least popular beer.
Okay.
But it's
also one of our favorites.
One of my favorites. So that's why we're definitely doing it. It is an American farmhouse, and essentially, I'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about Lando, but it uses our house culture, which is completely mixed fermentation, which means it has Saccharomyces, it's got Brettanomyces, Pediococcus, and Lactobacillus in it. But I use a lot of hops to control the house bacteria on this one.
Okay.
So it doesn't come across sour, it comes across kind of like a Belgian farmhouse, Belgian Saison.
Yeah.
But all the hops that are used in it are American, so we call it American farmhouse. We're always playing around with how to describe these beers for people. I think we were calling it, a hoppy American farmhouse.
Yeah.
So like people who are kind of into hops get it, but in no way, like when you taste this, are you like, oh, an IPA?
Right.
No, it's just like very farmhousey, expressive on the Brett side, which mostly would be like a Brett Bruxellinus coming through on it. And then light kind of Cascade and Chinook notes. So it's dry hop very heavily and huge Whirlpool addition and solid bittering to control the bugs on it.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite beers.
Cheers.
But as I said,
thanks for having us here.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
That's great. That's really smooth. There is no like big sourness to that either.
Oh no, there's no sour in that, which like a big part of what I'm always telling people when they come in, we're a mixed fermentation brewery, not a sour brewery. So these are like essentially wine tanks, but I use these all for our mixed fermentation saisons because their dish bottom is a real bitch for harvesting the yeast out of, but I like how the yeast behaves in this vessel versus Nolan Cali here, which they're conical, they're non-jacketed, so there's some problems with that. But like you see here, like
being like non-conical is like, that'd be super tough for the yeast.
But when the yeast, it moves differently in the dish bottom with the really wide versus kind of conical with that slope down. So it changes the profile of the beer for sure. And it's one of those things that until you start playing around with it, you're not actually gonna know.
For people that don't know, what is mixed fermentation
That's fair.
and what is blending?
Yeah, so most beer is just made with yeast.
Yep.
Saccharomyces.
Yeah, Saccharomyces.
Yeah.
And so our house blend and pretty much everything we do except pale ales is a blend of Saccharomyces and Pediococcus and Lactobacillus and Brettanomyces, which are not yeast. They are different forms of bacteria. And so the Wash is house blend, but because there's fresh hops in it, the sourness from your lacto can't come through, it inhibits it. And so then you end up with more like the horse blankety barnyard notes from the Brett that we're using. But then in the others, like you guys are about to get to Two Evil, it's definitely the most tart. It's not the most tart on the board right now.
This year.
Oh, look at you growing.
We just put it on yesterday. Actually,
Yeah, I haven't even tried it
yet.
yet. And so, I mean, some of them are quite tart, but then your blending game is what kind of lets you dial it back. Because the thing about brewing with a lot of bacteria in addition to your yeast, and then also the thing with using barrels is that you are really giving over control of your finished product in a way that you're not doing if you're just using Saccharomyces. And so that's where blending starts to make a lot of sense, to kind of take control back and make sure the flavors and the mouthfeel end up where you want them to be.
We bring in a lot of specialty yeast.
Yeah.
So we were like, I really pushed Escarpment to move to homebrew. Like, I don't want to say like I'm like the main force that pushed them into that a little faster than they wanted to, but probably. So I really pushed them on that side. It was first bringing Omega into Canada, and they focus on, they had a lactobacillus blend that I was interested in playing around with, so brought them in. And then first, and probably I think the only people that bring in bootleg biology as well. So all of it, like we really do focus on the funky side of bacteria and bugs, because like, I mean, it's selfish. I'm like, I wanna play with that. So the next beer is Fargo.
Fargo.
So Fargo is a gin barrel aged golden sour that I then age on lavender after I pull it out of the barrels. It's 6 to 9 months. This was a 9-month time in a gin barrel. Blended with a little bit of fresh, but the blending on this one is not nearly as intense as a Lando, because really what I'm looking for is gin and lavender.
Yeah.
And like it's...
You get a lot of lavender from this.
Yeah.
Lavender is a really funny thing to play with on the brewing side, because you have to be very, very
gentle.
Yes, because it will turn into potpourri very quickly.
Yeah. It's like, it almost reminds me of like, you know, maybe this isn't the right, maybe I'm just thinking about this, I don't know why, but you know, like when you walk into Michael's and it's like that overwhelming smell? I feel like this could turn into that very quickly.
Oh, very quickly.
I thought even that's what it smells.
That's what I get.
Like,
And if it was like a bunch of it,
you know,
totally. Then it could turn into that. Your beer smells like Michael's.
Yeah. That's
I mean, like, as
Kat's
someone who loves spending
she's
time
at
at Michael's, I'm kind of
all the
into
time.
it.
Yeah. Exactly.
No. So yeah.
Maybe that's why I like this beer so much.
I feel like if used too much, it would be overwhelming.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So
but we also didn't
actually
know that when we first bought the lavender, and so we bought like 4 pounds of lavender.
so much, and then I was like, I'm only gonna put like a quarter of what I was thinking it, and just like taste it, and it was just like, oh my god, thank God I only put a quarter in here. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, how much do I like it?
Yeah.
Like, can I blend it into something? And you can't blend shitty beer to make good beer. If you don't have good beer, you don't have good beer.
That's a good point.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
Homebrew shop actually started 2015 in my basement. Like, there's a good chunk of guys who still shop here who would pick up at my house, and they'd like bring in beers, so they hang out in my kitchen or drinking some home brews. And so it's kind of a unique customer base that we've built up, that they've really seen us progress from what we originally were.
Yeah, going from that to this, crazy, right?
And the plan was always to have the brewery, but like the homebrew shop was a much easier, quicker implement that like, I didn't want to run a brew pub because I don't want to run a restaurant, but I wanted like something interesting that had like multi-faucets to it. So then I was really into like small batch brewing when I was at Great Lakes. I was always on the pilot system there. And then me and Mike were always brewing in his backyard, in my backyard, and then the homebrew thing just kind of came out of that.
When you started, you had the Home Brew Hangouts, right?
Yeah, we did.
Were those like helpful in terms of like sharing ideas with other people?
They actually really were. Our first one was at a bar in town called the Bent Elbow, and there was a total of 8 of us there, including the 2 of us and our neighbors.
It was
and like John, who is our graphic designer now.
Cool.
And so like at first it was super tiny, and it was just like a few people who were interested in homebrew came out and chatted, and it was really cool. But it did grow.
It got
like
really big.
It got huge. Like it's because the way it operated, it was every month. And Rob would brew with a different regional or local brewery, and then we would basically like set up shop either at their brewery or at bars in town that would welcome us in, kind of thing. And then there would be an educational talk by whoever we had collaborated with on a topic that made sense for the brewery at the time, kind of thing. And then they would have like the feature beer of the night, and then homebrewers would just like chill and talk shop and share recipes, and it was awesome. Yeah, it was really cool.
We tried to keep it pretty tight, like a pretty like, okay, 15-minute, 20-minute talk on the beer and what we did, and then just hang out and like we'll be here and we'll just answer questions, and like
that seems so cool.
It was a ton of fun, but the problem with it, I ran out of time.
There's a lot of homebrew vibes, like just looking at what's going on.
Oh
there,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
like I built all this. We built this drain, dropped it in, poured it. So I run hot water on demand, pretty much an undersized mash. So I do focus, you find a lot of our beers are not super big.
Yeah.
And then double kettle. So I'll bridge these two and fill and empty off the one side. So pretty much fill up to 400 liters with loss, like depending on how hoppy it is, you know, like it's essentially a 3-barrel. If you're not hopping, like I do a lot of like 0 hop beers on the sourer side, and then you get better utilization out of the system for sure.
Cool. All right, so I want to try this next one. I'm going to give you the floor just to talk about Lando.
So Lando is essentially our in-house sour saison blend, and it is the beer I brew the most of, and it also has the most evolution within its own what it tastes like. So 11 iterations, and they will range from different barrels to different fruiting to different blends, neutral oak, dry hopping, which is some of my favorite ones. We had W blends, which was a Willamette Wakatu blend, and it was awesome. And the main thing about Lando is same base beer, always the same base wort that I make. I've tweaked it out over the years now into where I'm happy with for a malt bill, but that doesn't change
over
now.
the years, right?
Yeah, like it's like a pretty spelt heavy saison. And then our house culture, which I mentioned we used in wash here, but this time I use old stinky leaf hops for the most part.
Sounds delicious.
And like I'm keeping because they're older, the alpha acids are not as potent at this point. There's still some there, but they're not going to inhibit the bacteria as much. But I also age this often in barrel beforehand.
So when people say like, oh, super fresh hops, that's what they're going for. That's not what you're going for.
Oh no, so this is
super opposite.
Yeah, it's cool.
No fresh hops.
Yeah.
We have bags of hops upstairs in Rob's
in my office
that are
it's just
like as big as me and are ripped open.
Crack those babies out.
It's just, it's just like open bags of leaf hops, so it smells like super stinky and cheesy upstairs. But it's perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely, as I mentioned over in the brewery there, a different mindset from pale ales. And like I had to switch back and forth there for making them. So Lando does have an acidity to it. This batch right here is called F2, and I think this is the last keg of it. There's 7 different beers blended into this one beer. That's how this came together. So F2 stands for...
Hence why everything is batched, and no Lando will ever be the same as the other Lando.
F2 is all second use fruits.
Okay.
Through the summer, I make short shorts, which is our Berliner Weiss. And I age it on different fruits and have different versions of it. So once I took short shorts off those fruits, I put barrel-aged Lando onto those second use, and it was strawberry, blackberry, and plums. Then I blended those all together. Then I ended in more barrels. And then fresh saison. I'm always adding in freshly brewed, probably 2-3 week old Lando to freshen it up and add in some new culture. And in the end, it really is based off my palate and how I'm feeling. So like with blending, there's science to blending depending how you approach it, but I'm definitely more on the artistic side of what's going on there. Anything that's bottle conditioned is spent a good amount of time in barrel, often up to a year, but not always.
Right, varies a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It really it comes into, especially with blending, okay, how many barrels of Lando do I have right now? Okay, try this, put this together, and like, okay, this is 6 months, but I like how it's tasting with this. And so like, there's always many, many components, which is a pain in the ass for paperwork, but I mean, that's... So with this, what I do, I have like barrels that are maintaining to evil, and I pull them out throw them onto fruit in August, September when I'm harvesting. And then I've brewed in stainless the base again. So I have fresh to blend into and soften things, but also fill those barrels. So I'm maintaining the base taste of Too Evil in those barrels.
Yeah.
Until those barrels turn to shit, and then I'll throw them out.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to talk to you guys about was like the emphasis that you put on like learning here. Like we just talked about it yesterday. You had the Beginner's Guide to Homebrewer class, right?
Yeah.
But if you go on the website, there's like so much information related to like getting started with your first brew.
Yeah.
Is that something you really enjoy, like educating people on that process?
I'm a teacher
Cool.
by trade, and so when we decided to start this together, Rob was like, yeah, we're gonna be like a homebrew shop and a brewery, and it's like amazing, but also if we're gonna be a homebrew shop, we need to make sure that people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna make the kinds of crazy shit that you're gonna make, it's not shit, it's lovely, but the kinds of crazy things that we're gonna make here, then it also makes sense to educate our consumers who aren't necessarily our homebrew clientele. And so for me, I think education is, and Rob's going to disagree immediately, at least silently. I think education is one of the most important things that we do here. You
No,
agree?
it is.
Somebody was like,
So rare. Yeah, totally not.
No.
I think it's the most important thing because for on the homebrew side, like we only run our beginner class once every 2 months, and it's like I feel bad because it's sold out months in advance.
Yeah,
but
like
also
our May one has like 2 spots left in it already.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
and
just
like you know, like we
can't
could
do more.
Right.
we
I don't have
theoretically
time.
could do
Yeah.
more, but we don't
Yeah.
have time, and I run them
Yeah.
and I teach full time. So on that side, it's really important. I also am a big believer in the Beer Judge certification program. We run 2 annual in-house homebrew competitions.
Yeah.
And so helping people get access to information and training for judging, I think is really valuable, both selfishly because we need judges, but also because I think, especially for homebrewers, I think it makes you a better brewer if you can have a better understanding of what you're making.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand off flavors, it's hard to like know what you're doing.
Yeah, and then, you know, like we also do like guided tastings of our beer for people who come in and are just like, I don't understand, right? Like you said, a lot of people will look
this
at,
is great.
right, like,
There you go.
and like, right? And there are people who come in and will be like, I don't understand anything that's going here, but I'll try it. And then they try it and they're like, oh, this is really cool. I still don't get it. And so then we'll do like, you know, basically just like a table worth of people, like a small tasting for 6 people kind of thing that's like, here's what we do. Here's the kinds of flavors sensory-wise that you might be getting and why you might be getting them. And then Rob will talk about like, here's how we got the beer to taste like this and here's the processes. Education is a huge part of what we do, both formally in terms of like the classes that we offer, but also just informally. Like it's, you know, it's always super exciting when someone who came in and had that deer in headlights look comes back with their friend and they're like, let me tell you about what's going on here. And we're like, yes.
Some people like really respond well to it, and then other people it's too much.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like this isn't like, it isn't a beginner like craft beer situation. Like you should probably have gone to a few different breweries before you jump in to come drink here. But like show up with an open mind.
It's great. Thanks so much for having us. I feel like this is awesome. I feel like we've been talking forever.
Yeah, well, that was